If I can get a motion to come out of recess to continue our committee of the whole meeting, I'll take that now.
Motion to come out of recess.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Merrill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0.
Just mind you, we only got an hour.
Yep, we got an hour, so we'll try to move pretty quick here,
We
so.
can get through this pretty quick.
I think so too. Most of it's gonna be quick, except for maybe E5 is gonna take a little time, but, so E4, we had been talking about, sodding versus seeding and how long we should be holding the city kind of accountable for repairing grass after street construction projects and that type of thing was kind of where that discussion was going. And we had a resident, Leroy Johnson, who had had some issues from a project that was done on Main Street about 2 years ago, I think it was, or something. 2 years ago, we closed the project maybe even, so it's been a while. But yeah, so we want to kind of jump back into that, and what do you guys think?
Well, I think when, on our city standards is when you build a house, you have to have 4 inches of black dirt. Plain and simple. If Leroy's telling you there's an inch, I'm guaranteeing you there's an inch, because he ain't gonna BS it. I've known Leroy for 50 years. I think what we ought to do is, I think we ought to go have Public Works go along that whole edge. Because obviously the contractor ain't gonna jack about it.
No.
I think Public Works says, we got the compost, they got compost in there, let's peel that sod up, let's them get that down to about 4 inches there, just seed it, and let the homeowners water it. But I think going forward, I think we need to really stress this on the contractor's
I agree.
portion is, if it says 4 inches, I don't care, call me, I'll go out and measure the damn dirt. I mean, it's not that hard to go out and stick down something that's 4 inches long and say, this is black dirt. Because I know my neighbor across the street, well, next to Rissa, right next door to him, when he built his house, he went down there and he did some work in his backyard and he peeled the sod up. He said there was lucky there was a half an inch of black dirt.
Right.
And the builder said he had 4 inches. The inspector at that time said there was 4 inches. He said there ain't 4 inches. So somebody's lying someplace.
Always.
When I did mine, I had 6 inches. I tilled in 2 inches in the black dirt into the sand and 4 inches on top. I talked to a guy, that's all he does is sod fields. And he says, if you do that, the sod, if you just put black dirt down, the grass will go until it hits the sand and it stops. It's a foreign matter. But if you till it and it's blended, it'll go and the roots will continue to grow. I believe in that. That's what I did in my place. My sod took immediately. So I think that's what we ought to do is go along Main Street, all that needs to be repaired. I think Public Works is gonna have to do it. We're not gonna get this contractor to do anything. And it's not the homeowner's fault.
Right, no, absolutely not.
But, and like I said, if Leroy said he watered it, I guarantee he watered it. And I guarantee he said there's probably an inch, there's probably an inch. It might be an inch and an eighth, but there's an inch. I think that's the only way we can resolve that situation. But I think we need to moving forward in any projects, somebody needs to go out and make sure that there is 4 inches of dirt. Because if you're requiring homeowners to do it, we should be doing the same for these projects.
Yep, I agree.
I agree with all of it.
George and Jeff, what do you?
Yep.
Okay.
That's
we're
why we
gonna-
gotta have good inspectors that actually do the job. Otherwise, it bites us in the ass.
Well, so we just need to make sure we talk to Bolton and Mink that their inspector, when he's doing this after these construction projects, that he's, we want to make sure there's 4 inches, so.
Yeah, perhaps Mayor and Council that we could include language or at least set that precedence when we have our pre-con meeting that we want to do an inspection prior to laying the sod after your topsoil's been completed.
Sure. That sounds good. Yeah, so and then do we need a motion? I mean, will we need to bring that to council to direct Public Works to go and take that project on? Or is that something we can, I know you guys are busy.
Yeah. Are you saying all dead sod areas you want Public Works to do along the whole project area? Like to identify all? I mean,
I don't know if it's, I think Leroy is right that it probably is getting the park part of it too. I mean, But I know for sure there's 3 properties that, the 2 around him basically, that are definitely, it's, you know, a strip of probably that wide or so that's dead, you know, but,
I'm not saying to go all the way in the middle of their yard, by no
no,
means.
yeah.
But I think what was responsible along that construction portion of it, if it's 2 rows of sod, let's just seed it, not sod it, and tell the homeowners to water it.
But we'll need to take the old sod out, because that sod, some of it is completely dead, so we will need to remove that, and then place dirt, black soil, compost dirt, if we're using that, if we have enough, or I don't know what we have out there, and seed.
So I'm hearing no sod.
No
Black
sod.
seed.
And we don't water it, they water it. But we'll pull out the old stuff, bring the dirt in and then seed it.
Okay,
And we
4
won't,
inches.
and the city will not be responsible for weeds that grow, correct?
No, we are not, yeah, we're not coming with
Throw that
Roundup
out there, make
yeah.
sure.
But at least
I
it'll,
think
at
this
least it'll
has
be
gone
alive,
something.
yeah.
And we're doing something, I just don't think it should be established immediately. I don't think we should be going 2, 3, 4 years down the road doing
Yeah.
this. Especially when we've had the wet summer that we've had, obviously that grass ain't growing.
Right, and we can communicate with the property owners that it probably likely will not happen until maybe the end of August, which is good, so we want there to not be too much heat, so.
Yep.
End of summer, early fall is a great time to do seed too, if that seems appropriate to council.
I think that's fine,
I think we're addressing it.
yeah.
And use compost, is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah. All right, and then maybe, I don't know if we can, maybe you'll talk to the residents about it that are gonna be affected by it, or?
We'll draft up a letter and we'll
Yeah.
just post ours and let them know
Okay.
that the council discussed it and we will be replacing.
Yeah,
this.
just so they know
If you
what
have any
we're,
questions, concerns, let us
If-
know, because maybe they
Yeah.
don't want it replaced,
Just
we
if
don't
they
know.
want,
We'll make sure that there is a period of time that they can respond to
Okay.
Matt's letter and
okay,
otherwise we'll plan on doing it towards the end of August.
sounds good. Sorry, Matt.
can you get a seasonal to help you with that? I mean, is that,
My seasonal is really busy mowing grass every day.
okay.
But
all right.
maybe by August, it might slow down.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
fair enough.
All right, well, sounds good, that's awesome. So moving on to E5, Mike, we got water and sewer rate studies.
I'm prologue here. Definitely gonna spend a whole lot more time talking about water than we are sewer. I touched on this in the budget process, right? Sewer right now is in that active phase of, we just gotta keep stacking up a stack of cash every year till we get to that wastewater treatment plant. That is the plan. We will issue debt on that, and we'll go from there, right? That's kind of the big thing. Water, very different deal, and the two in this case aren't quite as correlated as one might think, because in water, the number one problem is irrigation. So that's not water that heads to the wastewater treatment plant, but they do still share a correlation. I'll give you kind of the brief. This is language that, so this is what I've been doing for years here, but this is city code and state statute says we can do this, right? This is the authority that we have. You know, we've had residents question me on that in the past, and it's like, no, we can change your rates, that's the thing. Some people don't realize that Public Utilities Commission doesn't apply in this situation. Same for small municipal electric utilities as well, but this is something to keep in mind. Everywhere I've ever been, every finance director I've ever talked to, it doesn't matter where you are or what utility you're talking about, everybody that is paying that rate is always certain that you're among the highest in the state, and they can't understand why it's not cheaper. That's always true. One good response is to remind them, but also to remind the council, if you want utility rates to be lower, the best way to do that is to be bigger, to have more people putting money into that pot. Gain economies of scale at your water plant and your wastewater treatment plant. It's really hard to be cheap when you are 1,000 or 3,000 people and you have no ability to do anything about the size of your water treatment plant except build for the future and then hope that you actually have that growth. And more people is better. And when we get to some rate comparisons, it's blindingly obvious. If you have 70,000 people, your water rates are cheaper. And if you have 7, they are not. Just how it is. And if you have only 1,500, they're even more expensive. This is what I've kind of been touching on here. And this language, by the way, this language on this page is the same for water and sewer, right? So we're going to touch it once. Large future projects, especially in utility infrastructure, really do require a 40-year plan. We've talked about this, right? That saying, I don't want to issue debt on a wastewater treatment plant, so I'm going to ask this group of residents living here over this 20-year period to cover all of the cost is just not equitable, it's just not fair, and some of those poor people who would pay really high bills wouldn't even use the finished product, and what a crying shame. So, and the intentional plan is, we're gonna issue debt, hopefully for only a third, but maybe even a half if we don't, or 2/3 if we don't get any state or federal help on it, but they've been handing it out like crazy for a long time, I don't know why they stopped now. But then I can stack up cash from this 20-year group. Then we've got the next 20 years. They're going to end up paying on the debt, but at least that's a considerably more equitable plan, spreading it out over 40 years rather than trying to scrunch it into a smaller time frame. We will look at other municipalities and other municipality rates, but I will advise you not to do that, even though I'm going to give you the information to do that. My advice, even though I'm giving you that information, because whether you guys want it or not, residents are going to ask you, and they're going to assume that you have that knowledge and have that understanding of how we compare to others. I don't recommend doing that. My advice to council is always make the decision that is correct for your community, not based on what other rate any other city has. You don't know the size of their treatment plant. You don't know where it is in their useful life. You don't know if they've been doing any maintenance. You don't know if they just built one. You don't know if they issued 20-year bonds or they got a federal loan for a 40-year repayment. The number of things that you don't know and will not know is huge. So spending too much time looking at other cities and other municipal rates is probably not a good idea. Focus on our lane, make our good decision, and if that means we're super low, cool. If it was the right decision, then we don't have to worry about it. And if we end up being higher than we'd like, if it's the right decision, then it's the right decision. So don't put too much stock in where other people are, but I do recognize residents are going to expect you guys to have some knowledge of that. So you may as well have it. Yeah, and this number 4 is kind of a rehash of the same. Water rates. Where we've been and where we are proposed to go. 2016, we had 3 tiers, right? 0 to 10,000, 10,000 to 25, and 25,000 and up. We're at about $3. We went up in 2018, 3% on those, and again, about 3. Apparently, there was a rounding issue back then. Those years weren't a rate study that I did, but then we had rates go down, right? We dropped 5%, and then we held it there. 0% increase, come down here, 0%, 0%. We're going to have to raise rates, and inevitably there are going to be residents who are not going to want to hear that, no matter what the number is. It is going to be important to remind them. We went down in 2021 and then held it straight for 3 years. That's pretty good in and of itself. That's not something to be discounted, and sometimes people do need to be reminded that that is the thing that did happen. Along that way, we did change the WAC charge some years, but not every year, right? For 2024, we just let it all ride. As things sit, and we'll get into all the nitty-gritty details on this, as things sit, I think this is the minimum that needs to happen. I spent a lot of time going over this, and I ran multiple spreadsheets for a long time. One being best case scenario, and one being worst case scenario. To give you a hint, I stopped populating the worst case scenario one, because it was clear that that's not an option. I told Jimmy the other day, if we end up in the worst case scenario, rates will be so high we won't have to worry about development. can't happen. Like, and we'll get into what rates could look like, and it won't be fun. We absolutely need more money coming in, but we also need people to use less water per capita. It just is. 2025, and we discussed this a little bit before, we have the introduction of a fourth tier. Currently, as it's structured, and again, we're not finalizing these decisions today. Currently, as it's structured, it is simply a step up from the current structure. If you kind of, maybe you've sensed it, maybe you already knew, the 408 is 25% above 327. The 509, 25% above 408. So each tier goes up 25% above the prior. The fourth tier is simply now 25% above the last tier. I know Luke has mentioned that, hey, I think that should be even higher, right? And I don't blame him. Trust me, I've thought about that in my mind quite extensively, and we'll get into why I don't think that that will work despite what I would love to do. But also, 637 is getting up there, and we'll look at some comparisons. 637 per 1,000 square feet, 1,000 gallons, I'm sorry. Granite Falls, we did cubic feet. It's getting up there, and so we'll look at where that sits and how that compares and what we know about some of the higher rates in the state. Base rate, I am not recommending just a straight 5%. On base rate, because of the situation we're in and the amount of infrastructure that might be needed to be paid for very soon, I'm recommending just a straight $2 in the first year on the base rate. The thought is that, one, I need the certainty of an additional revenue that will happen regardless of usage. The thought also is that most residents are not going to notice a $2 difference, right? I can't even get half of a coffee for that. But we do need to have that broad base of everybody contributing to this thing every month, even if they're not using water. We have to have some money coming in on this. WAC charge, we revisited that in 2018? And it had been much, much higher. Actually, yeah, we have it right here. We had been much higher. We were up to close to $4,000. Addressed it in 2018, brought it back down. Got it in line with others. On a WAC charge, considerably more comfortable comparing to other cities because builders and developers are doing that. And it matters. So we need to be competitive. We can't be too far out of line, either up or down. We can't give up money that's on the table, but we also can't try to take money that ain't gonna happen. Then after that, for right now, and again, as I view this is like the minimum. And we need some other help besides just these rates to make this work. 3% thereafter. Normally, I only do 3 years on a rate study because it gets more and more difficult to be able to project that far out. But I added the 4th year on this one because 2028 happens to be the last year of debt in the water fund. And so that makes it a little bit easier to have a proper demarcation point where I can understand a different operating budget forward versus backward. All right, so here's some basic assumptions that are more specific. The other stuff we talked about, those considerations, those are more general, right? They would apply to just about any rate study, but they're still important to know. Again, capital expenses increase over time at 3% average annual rate. Revenues are increasing at 4.5%. The difference there is that inflation is still 3%, but I'm adding 1.5% to revenue because I'm assuming I'm going to have population growth. That's been in line with what we've seen in the past. In the past, when I look at base fees collected, which gives me a good sense of the actual number of people that we have, historically I'm looking at 1.6 to 2.0. So let's assume 1.5 is a good safe number that even if development doesn't continue over 4 years, I'll be able to make that work. In this, I also assume the residential usage below 50K per month, right, below 50,000 gallons, will increase at about 1.5% a year. I think Jimmy's already thinking what I'm thinking, but anyway, we'll keep moving forward and we'll address what I think just popped into your mind. Okay.
My mind,
residential. The other thing here is, and this is, I'm trying to be conservative on this stuff and recognize that what I project forward if I'm wrong, I need to be wrong in the good way, right? I need to be wrong and end up with more money than I thought I would. Going the other way is not going to work. So I'm assuming in this that for residential usage, that because of that fourth tier, all usage above 50,000 disappears entirely and never comes back, right? So I put the tier in place, but then collected nothing on it, is the basic premise there. This is this line right here gets to the point of why I say that I had pointed out that I had two spreadsheets going, one worst case scenario, one best case scenario, and eventually I abandoned the worst case scenario because there was no point. The point here is, and the reason for that is that with water rates, electric too, sewer to an extent, but water and electric, there is an equilibrium point where if you just keep raising the rates, eventually people say, no, that's enough money out the door. I'm going to ratchet back till I get back to my number. And if you don't charge enough, they're going to keep using water until they get to that number that they're comfortable at, right? And it's not necessarily a definitive number, but it's a range. Somebody's already decided in their mind that $60 is the money I'm willing to spend on water, and I won't go above 75, and I won't go below 50 because I want my lawn to look nice, but I also don't want to be broke, and that's the number. And based on what we charge per gallon, they're going to adjust their usage, but there is a limit. So you can't just say, well, make it all, $10 per 1,000 cubic feet per 1,000 gallons. You will bring in surprisingly less money than you thought that you would, charging that much. Here's the other issue. If usage drops enough, we can push some of these projects out.
That was where I was gonna go with that. I mean, you'll see less income coming in, but you'll see less long-term savings on your capital.
If we bring in less money than I'm projecting, but it's because we're using that much less, that's good.
Right.
We can work with that, because to the extent that I don't have the same peak daily demand issue, I can push another well out. I can push the subsequent next well out, and the next water top, all those things can slide out. And when you're talking about that many projects of that magnitude, that many millions of dollars, each one this one going 2 years, the next one going 4 years, the next one going 6 years, the next one going 8 years, right? Because they don't just all shift 2, right? They compound on one another. Makes a really big deal. It's a really big difference. And this is a little touch on it. Reducing the water usage also helps keep us on our long-term plan for the wastewater treatment plant, right? If we end up getting to a point where we really start treating a whole lot more water than we ever thought we were going to treat, that project moves forward in time and starts to ruin that plan. So while I want to reduce irrigation, we also got to be mindful that in-house, in a building, water use also matters for the sewer fund. Don't need to be, and we'll talk about, we don't need to tell people what to do, but we can give some reasonable incentives. So there's a fourth tier, it's 25% higher than the prior. Part of the reason we put in this fourth tier, and we talked about this a little bit, but I guess I'm predominantly taking the initiative on that one. State of Minnesota is likely to view the introduction of a fourth tier as a conservation measure taken by the city. Right? Whether we view it that way, whether we talk about it that way, whether we tell any residents or anything, that doesn't matter. It matters, how does a state view that? The state is going to view that as, oh, that's a nice conservation technique you had there. And we'll be like, yeah, absolutely, for sure, that's totally what we're doing. But that might that's gonna help keep us in the Mount Simon Aquifer. And being in the Mount Simon Aquifer is a big deal. One, because I don't have to go as far. Every mile of pipe is at least $1 million. And also, I'm gonna get more flows, right? I have a better chance of getting 1,200 gallons a minute versus in the Mount Simon Aquifer than I do in another aquifer, and I might only get 800. Well, that also has a really big compounding effect over the next 20 to 40 years, right? So if I'm only getting 800, I now need 3 wells to get 2 in the Mount Simon Aquifer. And they're probably farther away. Things are gonna compound really dramatically. All right, so we had a fourth tier, all right? So it's not hard to figure out, right? If base rate goes up $2, and the usage rates, right, per gallon, right, go up 5%. It's not super hard to rough figure out what anybody's bill is going to happen. The big dilemma would be as well, okay, what's going to happen with the fourth tier, right? So remember, I had randomly picked July of 2023 when we all started looking at this stuff, and it was basically because I knew it was hot, I knew we used a lot of water, and it was been dry, and so that's what we did, right? No real science to it, but it was a good educated guess that that was a reasonable place to look. In July of 2023, out of more than 2,200 residential accounts, there were only 51 that had usage above 50,000. But some of them cleared so far past it, they had 50,000 twice. Okay? Now, if I just take the top person, that month was 104. Other months we've had people clear 120. But that one is 104. If we used, as it was, their water portion was $475. If that fourth tier had been in effect at that time, their bill would have gone from $475 to $542. So
That's not even that much,
that's
really.
not that much, right? So we'll talk about whether or not maybe that fourth tier should be bigger or more expensive, and we'll have a comparison on we can draw some conclusions about how that would work. Non-residential accounts, businesses, industrial, commercial, hotel, apartment buildings, that, when I say residential, think one parcel, one home. Non-residential, all the other stuff. There our biggest user was 551,000 gallons. Of course, the next month they used 650. So, we ended up picking the low month that summer, but that's all right. That month, $2,600 and change. If the fourth tier had been in place, it would have been about $3,200 and change. That is an incentive. An extra $500, that will do something. But we also are not gonna, I don't think we can just rely on just this either. So just to give you guys.
Let me ask you one thing on that, though. So is that, if it's a non-residential account, I mean, is that a business, or is that an apartment building, or is that?
That
you know,
one in particular, how much
Do
do I
they
wanna
need,
say?
do they need that much water for whatever business
that
they're
one-
operating in?
Okay, as long as she said it.
What'd she say?
Association,
HOA.
Okay, okay.
so basically it's.
So
part
it
of
is-
the
so it's just-
association.
So that one is
Yeah.
100% irrigation.
Okay.
No indoor use at all.
And it's also
100%
being
irrigation.
split amongst, well, and I guess, I don't know, maybe the HOA, I mean, there's shared cost, right? So they're,
It's a larger geographic area,
yeah.
but not all of it's grass. Right, I mean, aside from the obvious, like, homes and stuff, but there's also a large wooded area. I have a very, very difficult time wrapping my head around how you can get to 650,000 gallons on that parcel.
It's because I have had people that say in a few different HOAs now that their sprinklers are on when it's pouring rain. There's no
Yeah.
rainwater sensor, so.
All the non-residential accounts I looked at that had massive usage, basically they all had the same thing in common, is that they were running every single night, and some of them the whole night, 7 or 8 hours straight, which I can only conclude means that they were, based on the graphs look a little wonky, not what I'm accustomed to being able to see and discern. Usually I can look at one of those graphs on water usage, and I can tell you how many zones they had, and how many minutes per zone they are doing. It's really straightforward and easy to understand. Some of these, it's like, your zones are not the same size. This is really, really wonky, and it looks like you're doing an hour per zone every night. That ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
That ain't gonna work.
But I guess my concern is that if we, I mean, do we have any business in town where they're using this much water and it's not for irrigation? You know what I mean? Is it?
Hotel.
There are gonna be some,
The
hotel,
hotel.
but most of the businesses do delineate irrigation from inside use. So they're gonna have 2 meters.
Sure.
So it's a little easier to sort that out. And when,
Evercat,
what's that?
Evercat.
They have 2 meters.
They do.
And
That's,
they're-
that,
and they're-
my,
and
my
they're-
only concern is that we raise that in the effort to,
Yep.
to lower the consumption, but then we end up just costing that business a whole lot more money when they need the water to operate their business, you know what I mean? So.
Yep, and I can go back, we can continue this discussion, and I can go, but I can go back through, because I've had the same thought. And when I glanced through my list, I didn't see any that, at least in that 1 month, that stuck out as, oh, they're totally gonna take it in the shorts on this.
Sure.
But I'm
Or that they
It's-
wouldn't
I-
be able
I
to
also-
adjust.
whether you had brought it up or not, I don't know that I would be able to go forward without revisiting that list again. I would need to do that.
Yeah.
Because if we do decide that, hey, there is, business A, B, and C absolutely depend on water, they use what they need, right?
Right.
They ought not be punished. There's nothing that
Right.
prevents us from having a modified, some way of modifying things.
Okay.
Right? Whether it's for those customers, they have a separate rate bill that doesn't include the fourth tier, or they get a straight, $100 discount. I mean, there's a bunch of ways that we could figure out a way to do something for those
Okay.
users.
Well, and I do
But
want
I
to add
didn't
too,
see
because
any-
we have, sorry to interrupt, but like, we have an industrial business here, and they could do water, basically reclamation. They reuse, they take a lot of water, but then they reuse it, and we can establish sometimes, there's something special and unique about that business, that there can be a different rule that council could approve or something.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
want to throw
I
that out
think-
there,
I think most cities have,
to work
at
with
least
them based
one-
upon their need.
most cities eventually end up with at least one customer that has some unique status in that regard.
Yeah, right,
That's
because it's not like they're just using it.
That's not unusual.
for fun
And-
for-
and that's
yeah,
why-
right,
And that's why you end up with a unique
Yeah,
status.
like
It
they're
is
not
a
able
business that is
to
making,
actually lower their usage because they have no choice, right? So,
yeah, and it's a business that is actually making money, and it is actually employing people, and they are actually using the water responsibly. Even if they are using a lot,
right.
they are using it responsibly. They're not just sending it out into the yard in, 20,000 gallons a day and to never to be seen again.
Right.
That's a super different deal. So that is something we got to keep tabs on for sure. Then this page, it was on the other one, but I thought, all right, council might like to just be able to have one page that just has the proposed stuff. The other page I felt like was maybe a little cluttered, but at the same time, I want you guys to have that historical information. So this is the same as the other, except without the historical. This would be just the going forward information. So, not gonna spend a ton of time on this, because I gotta get into,
I'll be honest with you, I think it's something we're gonna have to do. I don't think we even really have to have a lot of discussion on it. It's something that's being forced upon us.
I think there's gonna be
There's a
discussion
lot
on
of,
this.
I think we're gonna have to go higher still yet. I mean, this is like bare minimum, and
Well- and we're gonna I'm gonna show you guys more than what's presented in here, and show you how this looks going forward, even in the best case scenario. And when you see how bad it looks in 40 years in the best case scenario, you're gonna ask, what happened in the worst case scenario? And I could tell you right now, in the worst case scenario, I was easily $60 million short. I can't
been
raise,
kicked-
I
it's-
can't
this has
raise,
been-
I can't raise rates enough for
this has been
that.
rushed through way too many years, and this is
Can't-
why we're in the problem
and-
we're in.
And this is, and we've been reviewing this every 5th year. This isn't like this, and the utility manager keeping a regular watch on this is gonna help a lot. But the difference between 2018 and now is in 2018, when we reviewed this, historical usage, we had been looking at like 145 million gallons. And we assumed 6% growth in population and a premium on the water use. And when we turned around 5 years later, population growth was like 6.8, so that was pretty dead on. But water use had then jumped from 140 to 260 million gallons. I mean, it went up 30-some%.
Well, yes, I mean, per capita, I think it was 2018 to now, is like a 35% increase per person on the water
you're-
that they're using, so.
Yeah, and
It's
we'll-
like, not only did you grow the population, but each person is using way more than they used to.
And
you
we'll
know,
get
so-
in, and I've got that information here too.
And
I
then
just want-
over such a short period of time, it's like how,
It's not in
like,
the house. It's
it's-
because people are moving up from the cities and they want the nicer lawns, and
right.
the businesses want
It's
the
the
nicer
irrigation,
lawns, and
it's the new houses.
all
The
it
new
is.
home-
It's all
ir-
good, it's all good problems to have
Yeah.
to deal with, but it's pretty much impossible to really see that you're gonna predict that much of a growth per person.
New home irrigation is an issue.
Yeah.
But really, it's the big, if I'm gonna just give you guys one area that is like the problem, non-residential accounts irrigation. For example, July 5th, one of the few people that got to come in, I go and buy my staff coffee and Caribou, pull into the drive-through before work. Oh, look at me, lucky guy, irrigation is on. This is right up my alley. Well, if you've gone through that drive-through, they've got a little strip on the outside, grass and landscaping. Irrigation's on. Cool, you guys, you irrigate your grass, irrigate your landscaping, that sounds great. Do you want to guess what kind of sprinkler heads they had and where they were pointed? They were not the misters that go out evenly to each side and can be set to go out 1 foot, 2 foot, 4 foot. They were the full sprinkler types. And do you know where they were shooting?
Street.
Straight into the weeds. Almost none of that even hit the grass. And I was like, but nonetheless.
Is that the weeds that aren't getting cut too?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Great,
Okay.
perfect. I love
Well, I'll
that.
never be able to forget this. Like, whatever. So then these graphs, I'm going to just touch on this stuff. I'm just going to give you like the highlights. Annual net margin changes a lot, right? This is basically like the change in cash. And based on the really bad 25, where we've got capital stuff, and 28, where we've got capital stuff, at the end of that, when I drafted this, cash available for CIP at the end of 2028 was negative 109,000. That doesn't mean I have negative 109,000, but that's after operating expenses and my fund balance, having 50% of next year's budgeted expenditures. Once I have that cash in hand to be able to continue to operate the water fund, I have negative 109,000. And since I published this, that's already changed. I now suspect that's going to be more like 220 in the hole. Okay. The only saving grace, and you can go through the other graphs, but the only saving grace on that, and you see that in here, is that if I was gonna pick a year to be short on cash at the end, 2028 is probably the year, because I get about 340 grand back on debt service not being included in operating expenses in the subsequent year.
The hotel is finally done, and then we're not.
Well,
eating
that
it.
debt's not, that is, was that, 2014 A bonds? I mean, this is big, those bonds were way before me. Josie probably would remember what they were for, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, so that stuff's done. Let's look at this real quick.
Are you saying she's older than you?
What's that?
You saying she's older than you?
No, but she's been here longer than me. We're actually pretty similar age, but, let's do this really, really quick here, because I know we're running out of time. That's not gonna work. I got this open, and so this is what you have in there. This is a god-awful amount of information. You could sit and look at this all night long. Annual consumption gallons, this is really what I'm talking about, right? When we were looking at 2018, 2017 we maybe had final numbers on that, and whether we did or not, we were looking at, 145 to 155 million gallons, and then we turn around and come back around here, and we're looking at 257. That's an absolutely enormous change. Meanwhile, population, it went up, no doubt about it. I have annual per capita use. Nobody at the state's ever going to use that, so don't marry that idea. But daily per capita use, 70 and 74. Here, well, we should pick 23 because that's what the last year we looked at, 95. So to go from 70 gallons per person per day to 95 is a really, really steep increase. And that's the thing that needs to change. All right, forecasting revenues, personnel expenses, all that stuff. Add depreciation in, put depreciation in, take it back out because it's a non-cash item. In the end, and we can go into this more on your own or with me or at a later date. When we say, all right, let's go to ending cash, right? When it's all said and done, when I consider capital, all those things, this is my ending cash. And here's where we're going to change a lot, right? From 3 million at the end of 2024 projected to 1 million at the end of 2025, right? And you can see the dates here. Then I get to a point where I have minimum cash balance, right? This is based on fund balance. At the end of the year, I need to have 6 months of money to get me started in the next year. Good, just be fiscally responsible. I'm not going to cover the whole year, but I can get at least through the start of the year, especially if I have a lot of chemical expense right up at the front. So then this becomes cash available for the capital plan at year end, right? And just subtract those two numbers. Not super crazy, right? But at the end of 2026, that's available for capital. 2027 looks better. That sounds great, except by the end of 2028, I'm already in the hole on cash available for capital. That's not going to work. Let's look at this real quick here before I run out of
So
time.
Mike, is that number there where you're in the hole, what is it 200 and,
No, that changed after I had already updated. So I had already published this, and, and that's part of the being in the budget process at this time. You just kind of have a slow trickle of new information.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna bet on this being closer to 220 now,
Okay.
in the hole.
Right, but is that with putting in the new well as part of that in 2028?
We're gonna look at that right
Okay.
now.
And is that with these proposed rates? You might have mentioned that earlier,
Yes.
but
What you see projected on there includes the rates.
the new rates,
Yep,
okay.
yep, and my best estimate of how I think this is gonna go. I should point that out. I mean, it gotta make some assumptions about water use. So I'm hoping that we're gonna stay steady for 1 year. Basically, the difference here, keeping it steady rather than having it going up based on population, is I'm assuming that that residential use over 50K just disappears altogether. That's how we end up with a stagnant amount. Then we have modest increase. And the goal here, and this might not be enough, what I'm showing you, this might not be enough to pull it off. But this does slowly march that per capita daily use down. 89, 88, 86, 85. We may very well need to move more rapidly than that, and it might be super easy to do so. We'll go over some of those reasons. God, I'm gonna eat up all this time. Is there anything else? Okay.
I don't think there,
Yeah.
let me,
Okay. If
let me
there's
just
something
look
else
and
we
see
need to
if there
go
was something
to,
else that was
I don't-
pressing, but I don't
I don't wanna eat it all up, but at the same time, I don't wanna
Uh,
short you guys on what you need to know. There we go. I guess we're gonna get a preview of the next budget work session, because we're gonna look at capital a little bit. 601.
Mobile food
So
unit,
I
yeah, you
had
would
a
be
second
the only
tab
thing
here
in
once upon a time. Josie and I talked about, well, we gotta look at the best case and the worst case scenario, and we should generally steer toward the worst case scenario, except it got to a point where that was a futile task, and I was wasting my time. There was no scenario where we were gonna make up a $60 million shortfall. It ain't gonna happen. There has to be a different plan and a different solution. That can't work. I'm not gonna spend time on it. There were lots of changes here, lots of cleanup, but the biggest stuff here is, I've kind of got the bolded items here. Land acquisition and a second tower were there, right? We've updated for water tower coating. We just did that work, but now once you do the work, it goes right back on the plan. Nothing changes. In the best case scenario, and assuming that we can reduce per capita use enough and collect enough cash, this can work. Well, 2025, that's not part of it, but well 5, I could put to 2048. Well 6, 2064. That's going to require another treatment plant. But if you haven't noticed, other cities, when you do a second or third treatment plant, generally you're doing like a smaller one. Like Bolton, Jason will call it like a mini. This kind of is. And Water Tower 3, 2076. Now, this isn't going to be all final and perfect, but understand this. Years up at the top, and at the end, this is the number we really care about. Whoops, right here. This is the number. This is my carry forward, right? This is, see, it's already changed. I'm at 212 now. So this was my working document. So once I published, I still had to keep updating my working document. So we're at negative 212. Now, if this all works, and I've got a point to come back to on this, unfortunately, this is where I end up. 2034, I end up in the hole again, right? Because I spent a bunch of money on infrastructure.
how far in the hole are you on that, at that inflection point? there?
485. So about 500,000 on that's cash. That's not a one-year thing. That's the ongoing cash available for
Right.
capital.
And how much did you say there? 100?
There's 485, about 500,000 in the hole
Okay, for that year.
for that year, but that's at year end. Like, that's the running total. That year, I had 8 million in expenses and only 6 million in revenue. And we'll get back to what that 6 million in revenue is, because it's the only way we make this work. 485 in the hole. And I go out, now if I just show you guys 20 years, you look at that and you say, all right, that's not the end of the world. But when we come out here, this starts to stack up, starts to look pretty good, until I get to the big stuff. Even in a best case scenario, when I get to 2064, and I get it, that's a long way out. But if you want to have a chance of not having absolutely development repressive water rates, we have to look out this far. And I know other cities don't do it, and that's fine. That's going to be their problem. And we can talk about, if we have more time, we can talk about 2 examples of cities that didn't do that and the problems that they have now. And we do not want to be like Granite Falls or Foley. I'll just call them out. But this is, even with all of this is the scenario. We're talking 25 million in the hole, 25 million in the hole. Eventually we get around to 11 and 5, right? But it just keeps going. Even at the end, 2079, 40 million in the hole, right? And I get it, it's a long way out. But if you don't want it to be repressive, we've got to, you got to inch your way there, okay? Also, even in a best case scenario, to make this work, and I spent a lot of time on this stuff, to make this work, I had to introduce debt twice.
What year is that?
This is 2034
Okay.
and 2043. So 2034, let's just filter this.
That's with a new well in 2025.
Yep.
And a new tower in which
So
year?
2034, we can just, we can just scoot over and you can see that a little more clearly, right? Can't quite, let's hide those years. Now we can see it better. So we introduced, whoops, went one too far. So we introduced debt, well, can't quite see it still, but it is gonna be for that water tower, right? Did I get that right? Yeah. So that's that water tower.
In 2034.
Now, yep, and that's in 2034.
Which, I mean, I guess is there, I mean, if you're talking about the water treatment plant being something that we should be bonding for, and we should be spreading that cost out over time so that it's, I mean, we could
I'm
apply
not-
that same
I'm not,
logic.
I'm not wildly opposed to debt on this, right? I mean, remember, there is a distinct difference between debt for an enterprise where this is user-based and people can choose to contribute or not. To some extent, water rates are compulsory to an extent, but everybody has an option to use less water to some extent, right? They have an option to choose to go into the liquor store and not, and if they don't go, then they didn't contribute to that debt. But the levy debt is the stuff that is compulsory. It doesn't matter if you ever drove on Main Street once in your life, I levied you for it, you contributed, you paid for it, that's it. So I think there is a reasonable duty to maintaining a debt-free status, save on that interest, because it is otherwise compulsory, and you don't have a choice. And like we talked about, if we stay out of debt on levy projects, it's buy 3, get 1 free. Well, that's a winner. But on this, that's probably how this has to go. The other issue is gonna be is that $5.5 million of debt is a pretty sizable debt service payment annually. Like, that's not 250,000. That's gonna be a lot closer to 500,000. Right? That then gets incorporated into operating expenses going forward after that. Then we've got our other year, well, let's unfilter that. We've got our other year, 43, which I'm assuming must have been to the well and oh, right here, that's right. We had a few things going on there. So I've got those. So water tower coating was a big expense on that one, and then tank room, filter tank A, B, and C, and D. Those are at a base value of 900,000, so by the time you get out there, we're doing all those, yeah, millions. And it's just something that eventually has got to happen. Now, a lot of this isn't unlike a car. If I use it less, it lasts longer, right? And so this is the hope. With all of this said, and we're going to roll this around in our minds and come to a conclusion by the end of the year for rates to be able to go into effect in 2025. All of this said, one of the things that needs to happen, in addition to rates going up, is we do have to convince some of the non-residential account users to use less water. As staff, we've already gone and talked to 2. I don't think we need to name them, okay? That's not gonna be useful. But the 2 were high users, it was irrigation, and both of them were surprised to find out that they were irrigating every night, even though they were being charged thousands of dollars for it. When we informed them of that and offered to maybe help, like here's a recommendation. If you don't know how to do this, maybe we can help you work on that. They were both very, very thankful. Handshaking, super appreciate that you came by. Very happy that we're gonna be able to save that kind of money on this. I had no idea my irrigation was even going every night. So I think there are some real possibilities to be able to nip some of this in the bud and give us some clarity before the year end as to how successful we might be able to be if we can start addressing some of those accounts now by literally just, did you even know you were watering every night? Hey, Caribou, did you know that you're actually just watering the weeds over here? You know, call an irrigation guy, get a different water head. He can set that, and you can do it, the kind of that mushroom looking thing, right? With, where you set it for a 3-foot spread and be done. And now you're not doing that. Others that are just watering for an hour per zone all night, I mean, it's not doing any good anyway. But I think we need to be doing some of that stuff. Actually, quite a bit of that stuff. Okay, that was a gigantic amount.
Well,
Questions?
so I mean, this time frame here is with the assumption that we get lower usage and that those different rates will attribute to that goal then.
Yeah, I assumed that in residential accounts, the water use disappears.
But I
it
mean, that's
wasn't-
what all your timing is based
But
off of.
but I didn't assume that it would, by no means did I assume that it would disappear for all non-residential accounts. One, some of them aren't gonna be able to do that. We kind of touched on that. There are gonna be some businesses that are, running a car wash or whatever that ain't gonna happen to get them under 50. That's not reasonable. Shouldn't expect it. It's gonna be what it is. But while it's double-edged, right? You need the money coming in, so you kind of need the usage. But at the same time, I think the more valuable thing is to reduce usage and push projects out. Because like I said, if you get back to something that resembles, instead of 95 for per capita use, if we get closer to 75, that first additional project that wasn't on this sheet last year, but is now, and there's a whole slew of them, right? The ones in bold. That first one maybe gets to move out 2 years. But that means the next one gets to move out 4, and the next one 6, and the next one 8. And suddenly that makes a really big compounding difference. And hopefully we can get to a point where in 2074, we're not 60 million in the hole. Well, we're not, it's not 60, but, 30, 40. But something's gonna have to happen. This is a big deal. I have not been losing any sleep over the operating budget, but this I spent time on.
But so, I mean, the timing that you have here is with the assumption that we are gradually lowering that water usage. Like I think you had said it's 88 and
Yes.
86.
Yes.
You kind of had
Yes.
factored in some estimates, so.
We still need to do more.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
Well, do we have those yard signs still from last year? Why don't we get those out? And,
Because now they're gonna start needing them, because my grass for the
Yeah.
last week has turned brown.
yeah,
It's- But up till now, it's been green as green can get, and mowing twice a week.
And I may as well say this now, is staff recommendation, anybody asks you, 15 to 20 minutes per zone every other day. It'd do wonders. And if everybody in town did that we're irrigating, right? Especially our non-residential accounts, if they all switch from irrigating the entire night to, a couple hours every other night, that would be a gigantic difference overnight. And that might give us enough information over the next 3 months, 2 months, to be able to have a little more confidence in whether these are valid projections or whether we really do need to find a totally different path yet again.
yeah.
I think we need to get out and educate, see what we can do over the next month or two, because this is our worst, 2 hottest months of the year. Then we really gotta buckle down and figure out. I personally, I don't see a problem with that 14% increase on the
Yeah, the base rate, yep.
base rate, and then it's literally 10 cents a gallon
And-
at
and-
5%.
and-
I don't see that being a big deal, personally, as a homeowner.
Well, and it's one of those things too, it's like, once you haven't raised the base rate for 4 years, going up 14%, I don't know, I suppose technically it's not even inflationary at this point, given what has
No, that's true.
occurred in the last 4
That
years.
is
So
true,
it's, at some point, everybody should have had a reasonable expectation that you can't just have inflation going up and we're just gonna hold rates steady forever. That ain't gonna happen. it was good. It sure as heck at the time when we had the last review in 18, boy, that sure looked like it was gonna be reasonable. And if usage hadn't gone through the roof, probably would have been, but new reality, so we gotta adjust.
I'd rather see this stuff go up a little more. Now versus having to try and
Oh.
bond and,
Let's do that really, really quick while I've got you here. We're thinking about this. This won't take long. Here, I promised you guys this, not because I'm not, again.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care about this. Make a good decision. Don't really care what anybody else is doing. Make our good decision. Let's do water. This is just water. And there's no science here. Like I just, like I told you, where's my Zoom? I just picked accounts or cities. I didn't try to, there we go. I just picked cities. They popped into my head and I put them on the list. If they made us look good, they made it on the list. If they made us look bad, they made it on the list. If they looked just like us, they made it on the list, whatever. This is based on 15,000 usage, and some cities do a base rate, some just do a minimum charge, which is, I don't know, substantively the same as a base rate anyway, whatever. But for fees, current rates, this is the other thing. Any of these cities, no idea what they're doing next year. Some of these cities might have their rates going down 5%, others might have them going up 15. I'm not gonna know ahead of time. But you can see there is a really clear trend. As your population increases, your water rates go down. You just gain economies of scale. I know everybody will say, hey, water rates should be lower. I came from this town and this town and this town. If they say that, and the town they came from was substantially larger, well, that's most of your answer right there. You can't come from Plymouth or Maple Grove and think that the rates are gonna be the same. I don't have 75,000 people. Can't do it. Declining populations. That's another killer. If you're Malacca, Foley, or Granite Falls, once you get into this death spiral of exceptionally high rates with a declining population, that is really hard to pull out of. I mean, really hard. So let's go to
That's a lot
this.
of money. You figure that's every single month. I mean, that is,
Oh, wait till you realize, here, this is what it looks like for water and sewer in Granite Falls. $240. That's for only 15,000 gallons of usage. Those rates went into effect based on a rate schedule and a project plan before I got there, but I got to be there as they went into effect and watch the impact of that and how people changed their behavior. People pulled out gardens. People stopped filling swimming pools. One dude filled his swimming pool in rather than try to pay to fill it. Yeah, that's all it is. Foley is in a position where they are declining new businesses because they don't have capacity. And they aren't collecting enough money to be able to keep up. They can't, and now it's like death spiral. Like once you get into that, there are no good ways out of it. So that's how that is. But to the fourth rate, right? Whether or not that's sufficient. This is the tab that has all the rates, right? This is us. Per 1,000 gallons. If they were using cubic feet, I changed them around. Top tier, 485. Top tier, 418. Top tier, 562. Top tier, 718, and St. Francis is one of the higher ones. Some of you have talked about St. Francis before.
Yeah, my brother lives there.
Their water sewer rates are,
Yeah, he was
And
there
it
when
was-
they were lower, then they jacked them up.
and it is because they literally,
They have no planning. And they borrowed.
didn't Bram
Gotta
have a
have-
certain,
gotta have-
similar situation?
gotta have.
I vaguely remember I was
Gotta-
at a council meeting one time in St. Francis because I was looking to do a food truck there.
Yep.
And I remember them talking about how they didn't want to end up like Isani because they said it. They did, because whatever had happened, that they thought, I don't know if it was some plan that we did or whatever, but, and that was way before I was ever involved in any of this stuff, but I remember them talking like that. Well,
She was on the other foot on that one. Princeton, 580. Maple Grove, 287, right? Maple Grove. Becker is also, they have utility revenues that tweak things too much. Elk River. Granite Falls, 912. That's straight across. They only have one rate. That's for everything. That's not tiered. That is exceptional. 570, 564, 525, 690 is fully, remember, that's the high one, right? Except they have a a 1380 minimum, so it gets a little, 425, 446, 490, 436, 480, 534, 333. So when we're talking about that top tier rate of, what did we come up with, 637? Relative to what's out there for top tier rates among these cities, and there was no science to this, I'm literally just picking cities, right, mostly just near us. 637 is a high rate relative to others. That doesn't mean that you can't say, no, I don't care, the right decision is this. That's fine, I'm cool with that. And you and I had the same thought. You're paying 2,000 to use 650,000 gallons a month, maybe you should pay 12. That was your sentiment, and that was my thought too.
I think
I
we
mean,
got
because
to,
if you're gonna cost every other resident and business in this town that much money over the next 40 years, I think you ought to pay a little bit more, and it maybe is a lot more.
I agree.
So we don't need to make decisions, and it's 10. Think about these things. If you're missing this information, you need to see it again, you need to walk through it again.
One
Please
thing
let
I
me know.
would be kind of interested to see is what's the per capita usage in some of these other cities? How do we compare in that sense, so.
I know the DNR says we're way over the average is like 75 in the state, and we're at, what, 97 or whatever it was? So,
I'd have to talk to Matt. I don't know how easy it would or would not be to get that information from
Yeah.
other cities. That's not just to my knowledge, that's not like a widely published thing, but I don't know, maybe that is, maybe the DNR has a
The DNR
subpage
does.
that just lists everybody, and I just have never stumbled across it, but.
Well, before I'd even consider increasing rates, I'd want to talk to every major water usage user.
I think we gotta be doing that now, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And like I said, we basically, Jim went over to those two and just was like, look, water rates are going up. I can see that you got some high usage. You mind if we talk about it? Oh, sure, yeah, okay. Well, I can see that it seems like you're probably irrigating every night for quite a bit, and they were both of those places, both those businesses were stunned. They had no idea. No clue. One of them just straight turned it off. He was like, oh, thanks. Turned it off.
Hey, education.
Yeah, that was all it took. And then he was and then that manager was super thrilled. He was
Well,
like, hey, thanks a lot, appreciate that.
Well, yeah, and then he gets to tell his boss how much money he saved the company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know,
So-
I think you gotta hit them in the pocketbook for it to actually matter. A lot of people, they'll say these things and they say they'll change the behavior, but if, at the end of the day, if it's only affecting them a couple $100 for a big corporation, they're not gonna give a shit.
Well, and so there is gonna be that component too, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just that a higher rate can be meant to be punitive to like compel you to take an action.
Correct.
But even after the action has been taken, it's not to say that a fourth tier can't also maintain that action, right? So they don't regress, be like, oh, 2 or 3 years later, you know what, let's just start doing an hour per zone every night again.
Right.
Like, that fourth tier can serve to ensure that they don't revert to that bad behavior.
I mean, we're talking about the long-term financial success of the city or not. I personally, I don't care if it bothers people's feelings that they're gonna have to pay more if they're using absorbent water. I would rather see it $10 or more for,
And-
that's ridiculous use.
And when
It's
you're talking,
greedy.
and when you're talking to residents, like, don't be afraid to remind them, the vast majority of residents are doing fine. It's not a problem, right? We only had, in that July of '23, we only had 51 residential accounts that went over 50,000. Like,
I'd be talking to every
some of those
51
residential,
them.
we'll have to talk to some of them, because some of them really are just watering exorbitant amounts every day. And we're not gonna compel them, but hey, FYI, this is gonna happen next year. These rates are going up. This is gonna be a lot more expensive than what you're accustomed to. I know you're cool with $650 or $800 a month, but
I don't think that fourth tier is really gonna even affect the homeowners, and that's what we're here, I mean, we're here for both of it, but at the same time, there's corporations and businesses that are watering 8 hours a night, every single night, when they could get by with an hour, and if you don't have it in the pocketbook, they're not gonna care. Everybody thinks, especially businesses, oh, I pay for the water, I'm just gonna use it whatever I want. Well, yeah, at the cheap rates that we got, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
but,
I'd still like to talk to them before we gouge them.
well, I think
Well,
I think that's key, because, I mean, council has said, hey, we don't wanna enforce water bans, we don't wanna have water restrictions, we don't wanna do that. And I get that. I think that's time intensive, I think it's combative, I think it doesn't help any council member's relationship with anyone in the public, doesn't help staff's relationship with anyone in the public, and that makes all of us less efficient. I think it's better to have a civil conversation. Say, hey,
Absolutely.
this is what's going to happen. I want you to know about it. I can tell we got a lot of overnight usage. Are you even aware of that? Because we found out
Yeah.
a lot of people didn't know. Can we help you with anything? And if they tell us to get lost, fine, all right, cool.
Yeah, that's
Well,
fine.
I'm out. But
The problem is you could charge them and they don't give a shit if they pay it or not. The problem is still gonna be, they're still using that water, which we're trying to curb them not to.
But if you
I think
charge,
Jeff's got 100% better idea. Let's go and address these people, and if they don't want to, you're gonna pay.
Just
Oh, yeah,
re-
that's
I
why
think
you
just
charge the
remember,
fourth
most
tier.
of us are here because we had issues with government. So let's not create that again. Let's go out and talk to our neighbors.
and I
yeah,
think,
but it's gonna create more issues in the future, though, if we don't do something a little bit, I mean, that's,
I think we
But-
can, I think we do both things, right? Add the fourth
Yeah.
tier, increase the rates, and just talk to people. I don't think,
for sure.
I don't think there needs to be anything
I
that,
mean, the goal would be to add that fourth tier, but to have,
Hopefully they don't
to
use it.
have,
Almost not
to
have
have
to use it.
nobody actually use it. Yeah,
But if they
right.
do, then they get that reminder on their bill, oh shit, that bill is $2,000 more for a commercial. That'll actually matter to
And
them.
I agree.
and you guys kind of alluded to this, right? Some of these are gonna be corporate accounts where, the water use is in Iceni, but the bill is paid in Texas or wherever. I can tell you as an accounting professional, if that water bill shows up, I'm looking at a prior year to see if it makes sense, right? Because I'm in Texas, I don't know anything about Iceni or whatever. I'm looking at the prior year and seeing if that makes sense. And I'm considering the dollar value difference from the prior year and the percent change from the prior year. And if it changes 2%, I'm not going to question that as an accountant in Texas. But if that changes 27%,
You have to make them notice.
yes, I will be questioning that, and no, I won't be paying it until I get an answer from somebody in Minnesota explaining how that happened. So there are a lot of these firms that they have faceless accountants, that is going to be the analysis that they're gonna make. That's just how that works.
And those are the majority of the overusers, aren't they, would you say? So,
And it
you're never gonna talk to corporate, we're never gonna make any impact on them. Corporate America's a fucking, excuse me, a wreck.
That's the only way we're gonna really
Yeah.
communicate with them, is they're just
The-
gonna.
the tag, the price
If
tag.
the local person doesn't change the usage, the higher bill will have to go to corporate. That
Right.
will gather their attention.
I just had one more thing. So your proposed 2025 base rate to go up 14.4% and then 3% after that. Is there a way we can just like spread it out evenly throughout the 4 years? Instead of jacking it up $2 and
part-
then,
Part of the problem is right now, for us to be able to deliver water at a peak daily demand, right now, as things stand today, we have to put in a new well next year. And I need cash. And an increase in the base rate is the only way to guarantee that. Normally, if we had more debt and more ongoing debt, I would be trying harder to tie base rates to debt, right? So I recognize, 500,000 goes out in debt payments. I want to set base rates to accumulate 500,000 so that no matter what, I know I can cover debt. We're not quite in that boat, but that's more the reason. And my thought wasn't spreading it out. My thought was if I don't do $2, it should be $3. Because I need that money sooner. Because if we don't have a change in behavior really quick, that's the other thing. Is that plan? The point that makes is, $1.5 million to $3 million for that well next year. To make this stuff work, I picked the middle. I just assumed that one for next year is going to be 2.25. And if it's not, all of this looks a lot worse.
all right, everybody go sleep on that.
It'll be fine, it'll be fine.
We will figure it out,
worried.
but council needs to be well informed.
Yeah, but we have to
So-
make wise decisions, and we're gonna do that, so. But yeah, I mean, and in defense of the council's decision 4 years ago to freeze rates, I mean, you and I were both sitting here, and we both, yeah, and we,
East side of
yeah,
65.
yeah, and we, and I'm sure we both voted for that, you know what I mean?
Oh, I know we
yeah,
did, but
yeah.
the whole problem is we, last year opened our eyes.
Well, and we
that
didn't,
was
yeah,
a
right.
perfect storm,
And-
100%.
yeah.
And there ain't a single person in this building throughout 24 hours a day that could have predicted what happened at that point.
Well, and to predict how much that per capita usage went up in such a short period of time.
It was,
Like, we predicted the population growth, no problem, but the amount of usage per person is.
It's from,
Wait,
it's
wait,
from
wait,
commercial
oh,
business
Matt's not
growth.
here. What do we have? In 2023, we had 1, 2, 3 days where we couldn't meet peak daily demand. And in 2021, we had 7 days. Where if our biggest well was down, we wouldn't have had enough water.
Yeah.
Like, and when we last did rates, based on what we had seen in the past, I would never have guessed that we could possibly have gotten into that situation, but it happened. So
Last year was
now,
perfect storm.
now
It's
we
the
make,
commercial growth. It-
now we make good decisions
Yep.
and take action to move us in a good direction. And, I mean, we will make it work, but council needs to recognize the gravity of the situation too.
Yeah.
So,
I have a, go ahead.
one last thing. We didn't even talk about sewer. Sewer very much mirrors this. Okay, basically 3-5%. The only difference is there's no point in adding the fourth tier, so it just doesn't have a fourth tier. But otherwise, it's 5% in the first year and then 3%, 3%, 3%. But we're just trying to stack cash, so, sorry.
All right. Did you have,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, George.
I'm good. I've got so many questions I'm gonna ask on the side, so.
Okay. And-
The-
Yeah. You
Well,
guys
I
think of
just was
stuff-
gonna
you
say
guys
that
think of stuff,
there's-
Write it down.
okay. Yeah, no, I don't have anything, but, all right. So we'll, is there anything else so on here that is timely? I mean, maybe the mobile food unit, just,
I would like to talk about that a little bit, just so we can maybe get city staff some direction. So I have heard complaints, a couple complaints now about the food trucks, and I am wondering, what we can do to maybe make it, basically local businesses that are established feel like they kind of got blighted by this, and I want to maybe make it so that they're not as affected by it. So, I believe the current, rule says 150 feet from a door of a business or from a established business. I don't know what's the standard is in Minnesota. I guess I'd like to look at that and see if maybe we increase that, because 150 feet isn't really that far. And then another thing is, what sort of, I mean, we're helping out food trucks, but what sort of incentive can we do for the local food businesses to make them feel like it was worth their time to establish here? Because there's a couple that have the feeling that, why did they spend all this extra money and pay all these extra taxes for a food truck just to come in and take the profit? So those are just a couple things. I think we should look at that a little bit closer. We, honestly, maybe we haphazardly approved or made it a little too easy. It sounded great at the time, but now that I'm hearing more about it, I don't know that it was necessarily the perfect solution for us.
well, the 150 feet is, that's not our number that we picked. That was I mean,
I thought it was like 300 or 350 or,
no, 150 feet is pretty common.
is it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if
150
you look
feet
at other
was-
city ordinances, I mean, the
Yeah.
150 is a pretty
That
common
is
number.
nothing.
Our ordinance, when it was first drafted in 2020, I believe, that was in there, and that was found by other cities. When I was researching how to make this more defined, because it doesn't say door to door, it says food establishment or food building, which is really difficult to define if you have multiple businesses, food businesses in a strip mall, so to say. But yeah, that was pretty common that I found. Now, I didn't do a comprehensive comparison, but that language was borrowed from many other cities
I
that
guess
had it.
I think I'd rather see it higher, because our city's already hurting for sit-down restaurants, and 150 feet, the subway, someone could post up in Subways in that strip mall parking lot. Somebody, I mean, and then you think about places that sell food like Quick Trip. Do they, I mean, I guess, do they want some, you know, there's places around. I don't think 150 feet is very appropriate for our demographic, but I could be way off. I don't know.
I mean,
It just seems like not very much.
if it's a distance, I can kind of understand that.
Right.
but Competition is healthy.
Oh, I
mean, if there's
agree.
If there's somebody in town it doesn't think they can compete with a food truck, they're gonna have to up their game. I mean, and using that argument when another restaurant could open next door to them.
Right.
If
But then,
it was available to do, I mean,
but it's like poaching almost with the food truck, because you can just,
like what?
it's like a poaching. You can just drive in and sit at the best spot in the town, which somebody with a brick and mortar business is gonna pay substantially more for that spot. You know, so that's where it's like, well, so the people that are here and established or are willing to put in a brick and mortar, I don't think they should have to compete directly with the one 150 feet Subway. They could have one in the same dang parking lot.
For
And then-
those reasons of what you're stating is exactly why it was not allowed.
Yeah, and that's,
And
like I
there had
said,
been many requests back in the day.
like I
that-
said, maybe, I mean,
they
and you
weren't.
didn't say that during those meetings either, because it maybe,
Actually, I did.
I
Did you?
did.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess I don't remember
always
it.
said that's why it always was important to have the food licensing. We did change it to make it easier to
Right.
get the licensing. And that was, and Jimmy was sitting right where George is, and we had that conversation, and you both and I both agreed to that. To make it easier for them, but not to stipulate, to allow them just to pull in, park in front of somebody's parking lot, and I blatantly said that long
Okay.
ago, that they should not be in competition with our taxpayers in this town. I said that, and I will always go to a food truck if I happen to be going by one, trust me, I will. But I am also gonna support my local restaurant. But I'm gonna do everything I can to help protect that. And that's why a lot of those issues were put in with the food truck stuff, that we all removed now.
What
Okay.
local
That's why I said
restaurants
maybe
do we
we-
have that are not a chain?
I was just saying, maybe we,
Two?
we would haphazardly did stuff a little too fast on it, just to, I don't know,
Well, I don't think that's the issue that,
just needs some tweaking.
the, there's, I don't know. I don't think the changes that we just recently made have anything to do with what we're talking about now. You
No,
know
but
what
it
I'm
brought it
saying?
to light that now we're
What the changes that we recently made it easier for food trucks to come in the sense that they didn't have to get all of this other stuff put together in order to get the ability to operate in town, right? We made it easier for them to operate, but we didn't change the distance from you know, but, you know what I'm saying? I mean, this stuff has always been that way. We didn't
Right.
change any of this recently. This has always been what it was way back in 2020,
But it's
so.
just come to light more and maybe.
And I don't know that it's poaching for a food truck to come into town either. It's,
that's the- that's
if they have the better business model and they're competing in the free market, and then George is, he's right in that sense that, you know, if you can't compete with the food truck, then, but Steve is also right, I think, in that you do want to protect your brick and mortar shops too, so.
And that's the feedback I got from,
Yeah,
Well, I
so,
don't think Jimmy was too thrilled that Quick Trip came directly across the road and started selling pizza.
probably not.
No, their pizza's nasty.
Well,
I like their
just
pizza.
saying,
well, but I
you
mean,
could have made
that's,
an argument right there, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna be an issue, not for many, many, many years down the road.
I-
Those food trucks are so busy and
Yeah.
they're always looking for the best areas. And I don't believe our city is gonna qualify for a food truck to come up and sit in a random spot on the weekends. We'll see. I might be wrong.
well, and everybody said Isani's too far away to really draw from the metro.
Right.
So is that true or not? All of a sudden, the businesses.
It's not true.
We have to
They're,
have
they're, a lot of these companies are moving out of the metro entirely because it's just too much bullshit. Just point blank, that's how it is.
But I'm not worried about like a DQ losing money from a food truck. Sorry, that place is packed and people will flock there,
Sure.
so.
I guess I don't think the 150 feet is enough. I don't know if we could just, I kind of was thinking maybe we just look over that again as a council or whatever and see if there's anything else we don't like in there or if we just leave it.
I would say just leave it and we can revisit in a year or whatever council's here. But making changes every time you hear something, I don't think is very good policy either.
One thing, though, that it should be discussed, no matter what number it is, 150, 500, whatever we choose to leave or change, is how it's defined. So one thing that you will see in that memo is I propose some kind of language of saying how it's calculated for when we have restaurants, and we have strip malls, if I'm to call them that, buildings in town that have a food establishment within them. If there's a food truck that wants to come in to go to an event of a grand opening of another business within that strip mall, can they be allowed? Are they allowed with permission? If they're not allowed with permission, but they're at that certain distance, how do we calculate it? Because I would argue that if we're saying that if you look at the language, it says by the building, But that building is not entirely food service oriented, it's just a portion of it. So is it from door to door? That's why staff is bringing this forward now, is because we have this come up with an application. And with the changes that were recently made, we actually did not need the owner of the business to give approval. That was stricken, that was changed. But because they happened to tell us where they were going, which also was stricken, they don't have to tell us where they're going anymore. We knew that they were buying another business, we said, you should get permission. Actually, they don't have to get permission, but they should be that distance away, but how are we measuring the distance? Staff has an application waiting to be processed, but we don't know exactly how to process it, because we haven't had to come up like that before.
That's why I brought up the 150-foot thing. From the door, from the building, in the same parking lot, is that a nay? I mean, how do you define that? I think in the same parking lot's kind of like a kick, like Subway. What's that? Yeah, like Subway or even Jimmy's, or I don't know what else is around here, but it's like, that's like to have one just in your parking
So
lot
you can just say 150 feet from the entrance?
of the
Well,
parking lot?
Well, what I found when I was researching other cities, how they defined it, this one said, and this is, I just copied and pasted, I thought it sounded good. For purposes of this provision, distances shall be measured from the primary entrance of the restaurant, and the primary entrance is the door along the street where the restaurant is physically addressed. I guarantee this city had a problem. And they're like, let's define this really well, not only from the door, but which door. Because probably we're sitting in the same predicament we were in, and someone questioned it and said, well, it doesn't say front door, street side door, you know? I do think that it would make staff's job easier and be more transparent to the businesses that have to have a food truck near them to say, well, this is how council wanted it to be calculated. We're all looking at it the same way.
I think 150 is
I
too,
can't, I don't do it. I don't know how to do it, George.
I think 150 is too close. Sharing the same parking lot, I mean, I don't know if that would make sense, just to say not in the same parking lot, is it? But then you have, what if there's a freestanding restaurant that comes in and then the next parking lot over someone? I mean, how do you define it? I just don't think 150 is enough, though.
Well, I guess that's something that you're gonna have to think about.
Yeah.
So if you think of the strip mall that has the daycare and the Chanticleer in there, right? Everyone knows that one. That parking lot is fairly large, because it's got lots of businesses. Would you say that anywhere in that parking lot is too close?
I think so. If you're even using that business's parking that they pay for to possibly park people that shop at the food
But
truck.
let's say the daycare wanted to do an end-of-year celebration, have ice cream truck. You're gonna tell them no. For
That's
the
a good
little
point.
kids.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
I think it should be, I think by getting permission
I mean, we
of
wanna,
of the owner of the restaurant, because in that situation, they don't offer a catering service, so they're not gonna offer that catering service to them. So by them doing something like that, that's a different circumstance.
well, the other thing we could look at too, and I bring up the ice cream because it's really simple, and I'm like, well, that's not much, right? That doesn't really compete, but we want to be fair. We can't just say this business can do this can do
Right.
that. You know, we have to be fair across the board, but what you can look at is businesses that want to have a food truck for an event, that could be separated out. Maybe, because if they're doing a grand opening, are they allowed to have an ice cream truck? Or, any kind of food truck because they want to celebrate their business there? If you say not 150 feet, you're saying those strip malls can't have one.
I think they need permission. I think that's the best way of doing it.
Well, so did we take out, I guess I didn't think we had changed that part of it, so we took out that they needed a signature from a restaurant that was within 150 feet. But we still left the 150 feet language in there, so they don't need the signature, but that restaurant would have to, that restaurant within the 150 feet would have to know that that was a rule and then go and press us to take action on that then.
So in reviewing what just happened with the application that came in, it doesn't matter if that applicant came in with signature saying that the food establishment said it was okay because ordinance said it's not okay. We took out the language that said you need approval from the owner
Okay,
to be
so we
there.
just said, no, you can't do that.
And we took out the location, yeah. So actually, even if,
So we tried to
every-
make it more simple for people by taking that out, but
now there's no
But now
provision that
they
said that they
can't,
could be
now they
there
can't get
within
within that 150 feet with
Exactly.
permission either. Yeah, I see.
Exactly.
That's,
So actually, we made, well, kind of harder, but not, yeah,
But
so.
not maybe harder if you don't think it should have been there in the 150 feet
Right, we were trying to
anyways.
make, we were trying to make it easier, but we made it harder in some sense, if, depending on what you wanted to accomplish, or what you wanted to
Exactly,
do.
because if you're the grand opening, you may
Right.
want to be able to have it there, but now you can't.
Right.
So I think that this is good food for thought, and we should discuss this further. However,
I
if
see
we
what you did
were to
there.
have a consensus tonight, the only one I would request, given that we have an application and we need to process it, is how am I measuring the current ordinance, which is what we have to do. It could change in 2 weeks, but for right now, the current ordinance is 150 feet.
Unless you have permission by.
Nope, that's not, it actually doesn't exist. That was.
Well, I'm adding that, is what I'm trying to do, George.
I know, but we can't add the ordinance to change, to process the application. All we
I
can
have
do
no
is
idea
the
what you're
intent.
She's saying, how do you wanna interpret the language that we
Yeah,
already have?
what's the intent of the 150?
150 feet, 150 feet.
From
Well,
what, from the door?
From the front door, or is it from the food building, and if it's in a building, that's
How was it written?
The entrance to the parking lot would be nice.
not very well.
Primary?
But that's the whole point, it's not
Right,
written
and
very
that's
well,
the-
so how do you determine that?
Yeah, right, yeah.
It states,
that's-
so staff made an interpretation. It's challenged, right? Someone's not, we have a complaint, someone's challenged it and said that, well, I don't think that's the intent. Well, staff has an intent, now that's why we're here.
Can you read it for us again?
So here's what it states. Mobile food units are prohibited from vending activities within 150 feet of a food service building or within 500 feet of community event. Talks about community events separately. So prohibited from vending activities within 150 feet of a food service building. How do you want to calculate the 150 feet when it's a strip mall that has multiple
Technically, the way it
businesses?
reads, the building itself is a food service building, because
Right.
it's one building.
Right.
It's not a separate entity. I would look at it as it's the building, doesn't matter where in the building.
I would agree.
Okay.
That's how I would determine that, because it's a
building, not
single
door.
building. It's a single structure. Even though you have tenants in, suite A, B, C, D, but it's still the building. That's how I would interpret that. It's the building.
That's what I'm looking for consensus on, is
What
how
do
to
you think?
interpret that. Because staff did not interpret it that way for a multi. If it was one business, because the whole building isn't a food service building.
But the food service is in that building.
Correct.
It's one building. It's not multiple buildings. You're not calling it a suite, you're calling it a building. It's like where Jimmy's Pizza is, those are all suites. But it's still one building. And that's how I would determine it. You're not calling it a suite, you're not calling it an individual location, you're calling it, because if you look at the address, that building has one address, and it'll say suite 1, 2, or 3, or 200, or 400.
And then that
I'm
would,
sure you've made deliveries to those buildings, and it comes up with 1147, 86, 37th Street, Suite D.
What are we gonna define as food building?
I think that's,
Seriously,
I think-
somebody could
That's
be
also
selling
part of it,
candy
but I don't
bars
think
and
we,
say,
yeah.
that is part of it that needs to be defined, because who drafted this ordinance used language that was in other cities, but they may have defined it. We don't have a definition. So
That's why
I
I
do
was-
recommend that we do remove the word food service building and we call it either a restaurant or something similar to a restaurant, which is already defined very well in zoning codes. Everybody knows what a restaurant is.
and if we did 150 feet from the actual building, not the door or the suite, that would protect Subway too, because I would hate to see a food truck coming in that Subway parking lot on the opposite end from Subway, because then you're gonna even catch the traffic before they even get to Subway, because the entry's on the one side. So if you're posted up on that one side 150 feet away, you're cherry picking Subway's potential business. So I think I don't like how
So-
much of it's written.
So if a food truck came in, whether it was in the parking lot of Subway or at Nick and Drew's, do you think people would never go there if it's in a Subway parking lot. I'd hop the street and still go there. I don't think they'd lose any business.
But Nick and Drew's is different. They're not selling a
get that.
meal. They're selling the food to go home and prepare the meal. I'm looking at it as a restaurant.
Already prepared food.
Prepared food restaurant. You could technically say the mobile station has prepared food.
Yeah,
Quick Trip has prepared food.
that's different.
But no,
Yeah.
it's not, because they actually have places for you to sit down and eat in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the language that we're gonna have to clear up in the future is 150 foot. Where do we measure that from? And then what is a food service establishment? Because I mean, Quick Trip, I agree with you. I mean, you could say that is a food service establishment, but you could also say that about Rendezvous, but, you know, the coffee shop, well, because they're selling scones and breakfast burritos, well, but then should Federated Co-op not be able to have a food truck in their parking lot that helps draw customers into their business because it's 100, less than 150 feet away? Well, that doesn't seem fair either.
That's where I said with permission of, I mean, Federated Co-op's not gonna have a food truck in there 6 days a week.
But I mean, is
they're gonna bring money in.
Rendezvous really a food establishment? I would say no. I think maybe it has to be on I don't know. You don't know the percentage of their sales, but you know what I mean? So you say, well, if it's a primary, if that is maybe their primary business, if they are, I don't know. So anyway, we gotta define that, but.
I don't know.
I brought it, yeah, I think we just need to talk about it more and figure out, because the language isn't,
Yeah.
it's not a one size fits
What
all.
helps
Well,
us,
yeah,
what
I mean,
helps this
and I know that
situation out for you
both of
right
those
now.
things have never come up before where they were an issue, and both of those things, I'm sure were, I mean, when we write ordinances, we take language that's been used at 100 other cities and use that, right? So it's not like anybody's at fault in 2020 when we made this, that's just what it was, so, but we do need to clean it up probably.
Well, then do we add to our ordinances that no restaurant or food processing place can open up within 150 feet of all established businesses? I mean, that's basically what you're saying, is you're
Yeah,
saying,
right.
we're gonna
I'm not saying
protect
that.
everybody so they can't have competition.
No.
Basically what it comes down to.
No, it's because taxes are paid, when you're a food truck, you don't pay a dime of taxes to the area that you come to. Which, I mean, you just,
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm a taxpayer issue.
I think so. I don't know, that's what the consensus has seemed to be.
I don't know.
I don't know,
if
I'd
the-
like to think about
The
it.
food truck's got a better business model than all the restaurants should just be in food trucks, but, and, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm just, but I agree with you, George, I mean, if they're gonna just compete, then they should compete, but how do you wanna handle the situation that we got here?
I think the code says building.
And, yeah, I mean, just because we handle it this way today doesn't mean that we have to handle it, we can't change it, or, but, so city staff thinks that it's door to door, right? That's what you guys.
That is what we said.
That's how you would like to interpret
We
that?
said 150 feet from the food establishment
Front door.
door, is how we calculated it.
And you're saying you think building,
I say, when I look at it, I say it's a building, but you know what, to make their life easier, I would agree with them at this point.
Unless some-
Because they're
I'm not
looking for
saying staff is
direction
right on it.
now.
I think it's a
They're looking
very,
for
it's
direction
a
right now.
difficult, it was a difficult decision. And that's why we brought it here instead of just doing what we thought was right, even with a challenge on it. I want to make sure staff is doing the intent of what council wants. If,
I see.
it does say
It says
building, and
building.
I'm not going
It
to argue
says
that,
building.
and I won't lose any sleep if I'm calculating it from the building. I won't, because I do think it could be, it does state the word building. I just think that when that was drafted, it was not intended to be applicable to strip malls.
Jeff, George? I mean, door or building, if we need to have a decision for them, I guess.
I mean,
Door,
I could go along with the door business right now, because we are gonna readdress this, and we're
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
straighten it out.
Oh, yeah.
But to get them through this situation right now, that's our decision that we make, so they can move forward. And next meeting, we can have this conversation and move forward to change that.
I'm with door.
I mean, I say building, I know you, Luke, say the same thing, but to make their situation better, for them to get this to go away as much as possible today, I'm gonna say door at this point, but it is, to me, it is a building.
I don't know, Jeff?
Door.
I'd say the door at this point, because I don't, in a strip mall, like Jimmy's Pizza, you don't want a pizza, a food vendor to come in for, a pizza food vendor. I would say from your store, not the whole strip mall building. That's just me.
But that's about the length of the parking lot anyway, so they're screwed.
Subway, that's over 150 feet.
I'm not worried about Subway
Yeah,
going out
I
of
guess.
business, it's a huge brand.
Yeah, that's
People like
fair.
their product. There's a reason why it's one of the biggest brands in the world.
Well, we gotta get out of here. So I think, the consensus is door 150 feet from the door.
Okay, thank you.
What do you say, Jimmy?
I have no opinion on this, man.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Skated out of it.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We are adjourned.
Fair enough.